But we're going to talk for just a few minutes from verse 17, where he says, if it be so, our God, whom we serve, is able. That's enough right there. He's able. He's able. Our God is able. We'll just deal with that for just a few minutes. Our God is able. All of us are going to have some fiery trials. All of us are going to have some moments of grief. All of us are going to have some disappointments. All of us are going to experience some heartaches. There once was a time when all young folk had to do was just go to school. But now even young folk are having fiery trials. And fiery trials are not easy. But God allows us to go through fiery trials to test us. A faith that can't be tested can't be trusted. I wouldn't want a doctor to operate on me who's not been tested. I'm not going to get on an airplane and fly with a pilot who's not been tested. But when God sends a test, God is testing us to develop our faith. And every time God brings us through a test, we ought to trust Him a little bit more. We ought to love Him just a little bit more. We ought to be able to depend on Him just a little bit more. And when your test comes, and it's coming, if you haven't had your test, you just hold on. You just keep on walking this path called life. There's a test in your path. And when your test comes, remember that we have a God who's able. And He gives us this book of Daniel as an example to show us how to come out victoriously when we are tested. You know, we're in chapter 3, and the first 2 chapters is all about Daniel. And Daniel is setting examples for the others, and Daniel goes through his test. But then we get to these 3 boys. And when you get to three boys, somehow, somewhere, Daniel has not disappeared. And Daniel is nowhere in the picture. And these boys who had been looking to Daniel as their example, and now Daniel is gone. And what I'm saying is, when your test comes, Mama might be gone. Daddy might be gone. You may not be able to even come near the church when your test comes. But whenever your test comes, just remember that God is able. And He shows us here how to come out victoriously when we are tested. In this test, we see these 3 boys who we've come to know as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. And they're in captivity in a foreign land. And we know them as Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego. But those were not their given names. They were born in Israel. And when they were born, they were given godly names. You know, once was a time when we gave our children godly names. Like David and Paul and Samson and Mark and Luke and Timothy. But nowadays, Folk come up with some names that I can't pronounce. I mean, some of these names we use now, I wonder where they get these names from. Whether they make them up. But there was once a time we used godly names for our children. And these three boys, when they went into captivity, the Babylonians changed their names. Shadrach's given name was Hananiah, which means gracious is Jehovah. Meshach's name was Mishael, which means who is like God. And Abednego's name was Azariah, meaning Jehovah is my helper. But when the enemy got control of them, the enemy changed their name. You see, changing the name implies power over the one whose name is changed. And even though they changed their name, they couldn't change their nature. You know, once was a time when if somebody called you a dog, you'd be ready to fight. But now I hear a young man say, hey dog. And they're not offended by it. But just because they call you a dog, don't mean you got to act like a dog. And when our young lady, there once was a time when if you called a girl a B or a W, I ain't got to spell it out, you know what the rest of it is, that they would get offended. Yeah, you would fight. But just because they call you a B, don't mean you got to act like a B. The world might change your name, but don't you let the world change your nature. Because God is looking for some folk who are going to be not conformed to this world. So I don't care what they call you, act like a Christian. And so King Nebuchadnezzar had set up this golden image. You know the story. He created this golden image 90 feet high and 9 feet wide. It was huge. It was marvelous. It was magnificent. It was made out of pure gold. It was a beauty to behold. It was a thing to be admired. And he set it out on the plain of Dura, where the land was flat, and it could be seen from miles away. You know, the world has got its golden images. Some of the folk in the world look like they're 90 feet high. They look like they're 9 feet wide. Some of them act like they're 9 feet tall. They act like can't nobody touch them or can't nobody do nothing to them. That's what's wrong with that boy down there in Florida the other day, Justin Bieber. Think he done got so big. There can't nobody touch him, except when the police stopped him. He asked him, do y'all know who I am? They said, yeah, turn your hands around. We got something to fit you too. And so the king set up this golden, magnificent image and said, go get all the folk, go get everybody, all the languages, all the nations. And then he could have said, when you see my image. But he didn't say, when you see the image, he said, go get the band. He said, when you hear the music. He said, bring all of the instruments. Bring the harp, bring the sackbut, bring the cornet, bring the flute. He said, bring all of the instruments. Now, if you look in Chronicles, you'll find that these are the same instruments that David dedicated to the music in the house of the Lord. These instruments were created for praise. Did y'all hear that? Yeah. These instruments were created for praise. But the world uses them for idol worship. Young folk, you've been created for praise. Your hands have been created for praise. Your voice has been created for praise. Don't let the world make you use it for their idol. You've been created for praise. And so he said, when you hear the music, you know, there's something about music that seems to grip people and get a hold on them. Every time you hear the national anthem, you're expected to stop what you're doing and stand still and put your hand over your heart. Somebody wrote that music can calm the savage beast, or that music can release the savage in the beast. When Saul would have his breaks, his fits, and had those rages and go into those fits, they would send for David, and David would just play some music. And that music would just calm Saul down. There's something about music. Y'all remember when you were in the nightclub? And the music started playing? And the music get good, you just couldn't sit in your seat? You just had to get up on the dance floor? That didn't just start then. Back in 2 Chronicles, they said when they set up the temple and the musicians began to play and the singers began to sing, that the glory of God came down and filled the house, and the priest wasn't able to minister because of the music. Sometimes they get like this and here, sometimes the choir get to singing so. And the glory of the God comes in and just fills the building. And we can't do nothing doing it but just pray. There's something about music. And so he said, when you hear the music, fall down and worship me. And so on that day, I believe the sun was shining. The wind was calm. There were thousands of people out there on the plain of Dura. And as far back as you could see, there was nothing but a sea of people. And here was this giant, magnificent, marvelous, 90-foot golden statue. And the band started playing. And they kept on playing. And I believe the more they played, I believe the people began to rock. And the band kept playing. And I believe they started going down. And the band kept playing. And I believe they kept on going down. And the band kept playing. The band kept playing, y'all. And everybody went down. But then they looked up and there were 3 boys in the back who decided not to dance to the devil's music. See, sometimes you got to make a stand not to dance to the devil's music. And so they went and told the king first that, king, oh king, live forever. The devil know how to flatter you when they want something from you. They come in and say, oh king, live forever. No, there ain't no way the king gonna